The rain had begun before dawn, a soft patter against the stone parapets of Buckingham Palace that slowly swelled into a steady rhythm, echoing through the courtyard like distant drum. Inside the north wing, where the corridors were long and the ceilings rose high enough to swallow entire secrets, Guard Lieutenant Rowan Hale adjusted the collar of his ceremonial jacket while listening to the muted hum of staff preparing for the day. He had served the crown for 17 loyal years, rising through silent dedication and the quiet, unwavering discipline inherited from 3 generations of Hale men before him. Buckingham was as familiar to him as breath itself, yet on mornings like this, when the rain cloaked the palace in a hushed, reflective darkness, Rowan felt the weight of his duty more intensely than usual. There was something about the stillness, the way footsteps softened on polished floors, that reminded him that within these gilded walls, unseen stories curled between the shadows. Rowan made his first patrol along the East Gallery, where portraits of monarchs stared down with eyes that seemed to observe far more than they revealed. His boots struck a muted cadence as he walked, hands clasped behind him. The scent of beeswax polish lingered from the early morning cleaners, mixing with the faint, almost sweet fragrance of old paper drifting from a nearby archival room. He paused at one window, watching droplets slide down the glass in thin, patient trails. It was a calm morning, the kind that settled into the bones, and yet Rowan sensed a subtle tautness in the air, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. His father had always said the palace whispered when something was about to happen. As a young boy, Rowan had followed him through Sandringham's service corridors during holidays, listening to tales of long-ago guards who had stumbled upon secrets never meant for daylight. Some stories were exaggerated, no doubt, but others carried a ring of truth that had marked Rowan's imagination. Even now, as a fully grown officer trusted by the king himself, Rowan felt those old tales rest on his shoulders like invisible epaulets. He didn't believe in superstition, but he believed in patterns, shifts in atmosphere, changes in staff behavior, the almost imperceptible ripple before a storm. He continued toward the West Wing, passing through the connecting corridor that bridged the private rooms used by Queen Camilla and the guest apartments reserved for visiting dignitaries. It was a quiet area at this hour. Most staff avoided the Queen Consort's hallway until her attendants formally signaled she had begun her morning routine. There was protocol here, layers of respect and distance that everyone followed instinctively. Rowan moved with the same measured discipline, but today something tugged faintly at his attention. A door he didn't recall seeing open, not wide, just barely ajar, letting out a sliver of dim amber light. He slowed, scanning the hallway. Everything else was still. Only the soft hum of a heating vent filled the silence. Rowan stepped closer, eyes narrowing. The door belonged to one of the older reception rooms historically used for storage before the Queen Consort's arrival. Recently, he'd heard it had been repurposed for her private working files and correspondence, though he had never been assigned to that area directly. Normally, the door remained firmly shut, guarded not by personnel, but by layers of assumption this room belonged to the Queen Consort's world, and guards did not enter without explicit request. Rowan drew a steady breath, reminding himself he was only ensuring security. Perhaps a cleaner had forgotten to shut it. Perhaps maintenance had inspected the radiator. Yet instinct whispered otherwise. There was no sound inside, no movement, and most importantly, no authorization log showing someone had requested access that morning. He placed 2 fingers gently on the edge of the door, intending merely to test how firmly it rested on the latch. To his surprise, it drifted inward with a soft sigh, as though it had been waiting for a curious hand. He stopped immediately. He hadn't crossed the threshold, and he wouldn't not unless there was clear cause. But the thin gap revealed part of the room beyond. Shelves lined with carefully arranged binders, a writing desk positioned beneath a tall lamp, and something else he couldn't quite make out, half covered beneath a velvet cloth. Rowan's pulse tightened. It wasn't unusual for royalty to maintain personal rooms, but the energy around this one felt decidedly different. It wasn't simply private, it felt intentionally veiled, almost feverishly concealed. He stepped back, closing the door as silently as he had opened it. The latch clicked softly, and the faint amber glow disappeared. Rowan made a mental note to check the access logs later. though he knew full well that such records were often redacted for senior royals. Still, it was procedure. And procedure anchored him when instinct threatened to tug him too far. He resumed his route, though he walked with a heightened awareness now, listening carefully for any shift in the palace's hush. By the time he reached the grand staircase, the palace had begun to stir. Footsteps echoed from the lower hall, where two junior guards were changing position. A steward hurried past with a silver tray of correspondence, while a young maid navigated the steps with an armful of folded linens. Their movements carried the usual early morning rhythm, yet Rowan couldn't shake the sensation that the hallway behind him still tugged at the edge of his thoughts, whispering questions. He arrived at the king's antechamber just as the clock struck 8. Soft chimes drifted through the vaulted ceilings, mingling with the rustle of aides arranging documents for the king's briefing. Rowan stationed himself outside the double doors, hands folded neatly behind him, posture straight. This was familiar territory. Security for the king's morning meetings was routine. Yet routine had a way of sharpening Rowan's senses. The calmer the task, the louder his intuition became. The silence in that hallway, the open door, the amber light, they clung to him like small, persistent ghosts. A pair of senior advisors approached, greeting him with polite nods before entering the antechamber. Their clipped voices faded behind the heavy doors, leaving Rowan alone once more with his thoughts. He wasn't prone to distraction, but neither was he naive. He knew the queen consort kept personal archives, letters, and private communications. None of that was unusual. But this morning felt different. Something had shifted, subtly but distinctly, like a curtain trembling before a reveal. He inhaled slowly, grounding himself in the steady rhythm of his duty. Whatever lay behind that door was not his concern, unless it threatened the safety of those he was sworn to protect. And yet, even as he reaffirmed this, Rowan couldn't shake the sense that he had brushed the edge of something far larger than a misplaced lamp or forgotten cleaner. Something in the palace's atmosphere had changed, and he had felt its first ripple. It was only morning, and already the day felt poised on a delicate hinge. The palace was waking, the rain beginning to fade, staff moving in predictable patterns, but beneath it all, Rowan sensed a quiet prelude, an unseen shift in the narrative of the walls he knew so well. Whatever awaited him, the whisper of that half-open door lingered, urging him forward toward revelations he did not yet understand. By mid-morning, Buckingham had settled into a rhythm of soft footsteps and muted voices, the earlier rain leaving slick patterns across the marble floors. Guard Lieutenant Rowan Hale resumed his patrol, but the memory of the half-open door lingered in the back of his mind. He kept his eyes sharp, scanning corridors and corners with meticulous precision, aware that even the smallest irregularity could indicate something amiss. His instincts, honed over 17 years, hummed beneath the surface like a taut string. Something was coming, though he didn't yet know what. Rowan approached the south wing, where Queen Camilla's private chambers connected to the small antechambers used by her closest aides. The air smelled faintly of polished oak and fresh lavender, a combination he had come to associate with her morning routines. There, he noticed a figure moving quickly, almost gliding, between the hallways. It was young Olivia Hawthorne, a new assistant recently assigned to the queen consort. Rowan had seen her only a handful of times before. Polite, attentive, yet visibly nervous in the presence of senior staff. Today, she seemed unusually tense, darting glances over her shoulder as if she feared being seen. He slowed his pace, observing without interrupting. Olivia paused by a large tapestry depicting Queen Victoria's coronation, crouching briefly to inspect the floorboards. Rowan's brow furrowed. Such behavior was not standard. No staff member, especially a junior assistant, would linger here without purpose. He considered calling out, but something restrained him. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible urgency in her movements, and Rowan had learned over the years that rushing someone without understanding context could escalate problems unnecessarily. He continued his patrol, keeping her within sight while maintaining the professional distance required of his role. Moments later, a faint muffled voice reached him from the corridor leading to the private quarters. Rowan's ears, trained to detect the slightest anomaly, immediately picked up on it. The tone was low, hurried, almost conspiratorial. He paused near a grand pillar, listening. The words were indistinct, but the cadence carried an edge of warning or fear. Rowan's hand brushed against the polished stone, grounding himself. No one else in the immediate area reacted. The palace hummed along in its usual order, oblivious to the faint tremor that now stirred within the walls. Curiosity warred with caution. Rowan knew the rules. He was a guardian, not a spy. Yet his instincts compelled him to investigate. Without stepping fully into the hallway, he edged closer, using the angle of the pillar for partial cover. From this vantage, he glimpsed Olivia slipping something small into her sleeve, a folded document, perhaps a key, possibly a note. She glanced again toward the main door to the Queen Consort's chambers, hesitated, and then continued down the hallway with a measured urgency. Rowan's mind raced. This was irregular. It could be innocuous, a routine delivery, a minor task, but the subtle signals were familiar. The hurried glances, the half-whispered tone, the almost imperceptible tension in her posture. These were signs he had observed countless times, over years of palace incidents. Something hidden, something important, was moving through these corridors right now. He decided to follow, keeping a discreet distance. The sound of polished shoes echoed faintly behind him, a reminder that even silence in the palace could be deceptive. Olivia moved toward a section of the hallway he rarely patrolled, near a small staircase that led to a service mezzanine. The area was narrow, and the walls pressed in, giving the corridor a confining, almost secretive feel. Rowan adjusted his grip on his ceremonial baton, a gesture more for reassurance than for any immediate threat. As Olivia reached the top of the staircase, she paused again. Rowan froze, noticing a subtle shiver in her shoulders. The muffled voice had returned, softer this time, as if someone whispered from a hidden alcove. Rowan strained to catch the words, but they remained indistinct, carried away by the echoes of the palace's high ceilings. He sensed that she was being watched, or that she believed she was. The tension in the air was thick, almost tactile, like the first heavy breaths before a storm breaks. The young assistant turned toward a small, unassuming door at the end of the mezzanine. It was easily overlooked, plain, unadorned, and partially concealed by a heavy curtain that framed a narrow side window. Rowan's pulse quickened. He knew this section of the palace well. Doors here were rarely used, often left as secondary access for staff or emergency purposes. Yet this one, he realized, had not appeared on any of his daily security updates. Something was happening behind it that had no official record. Olivia fumbled with the lock. It was small, delicate, and appeared almost hidden in its mechanism. Rowan remained a few steps back, aware that any sudden move could alert her. She worked carefully, her fingers trembling slightly, the document still clutched against her chest. Then, with a soft click, the door swung open a fraction, just enough for her to slip inside. Rowan caught a glimpse of a flickering candlelight, an amber glow spilling into the hallway. His chest tightened. He took a quiet, measured breath. Guards were trained to notice things others missed, and Rowan had learned to trust these early warnings. He stepped slightly closer, careful to remain unseen, as he watched Olivia disappear into the room. The silence of the corridor returned almost immediately, broken only by the distant echo of footsteps far down the hall. The palace seemed unaware of the subtle breach that had just occurred. For several minutes, Rowan stood in place, weighing his options. Rules dictated distance. Protocol dictated he report unusual movements immediately, but instinct reminded him that some secrets were too fragile, too dangerous, to be exposed prematurely. He could not yet confirm the nature of what she carried or why she had slipped into that hidden room. The stakes were rising, even if the palace itself remained oblivious. Finally, Rowan made a decision. He would observe discreetly from outside the door, noting every detail that emerged, ready to intervene if anything threatened the queen consort or the integrity of the palace. He moved quietly along the wall, finding a vantage point where the curtain allowed him a partial view without revealing his presence. The flickering light cast dancing shadows across the floor, and the faint rustle of fabric from inside suggested Olivia was not alone. Someone else, perhaps, awaited her in the chamber. A sudden draft whispered down the hallway, carrying the faint scent of polished wood and candle wax. Rowan's eyes narrowed. This room, whatever its purpose, seemed deliberately concealed, a private chamber designed to hide more than it revealed. He felt a shiver run down his spine. The palace was alive with subtle currents of secrecy, and he had stumbled upon one of the first ripples. Then, a sound froze him completely. A low, controlled voice, calm yet laced with authority. Rowan recognized it instantly. Queen Camilla herself. She spoke not loudly, but with a precision that cut through the quiet. "Are you certain it is ready?" Her words were soft, but their tone carried command, expectation, and a hint of something darker, impatience, perhaps, or anticipation. Rowan's heart thudded. This was no routine delivery. The queen consort was actively overseeing something hidden, something deliberately concealed from the eyes of palace staff and, perhaps, even the king. Olivia's presence, the document, the flickering candlelight, all signaled a private mission, delicate and secretive. Rowan's training kicked in. He would not rush, he would not confront, he would observe. And yet, the moral weight of what he might witness pressed down on him, heavy and immediate. As the minutes stretched, Rowan adjusted his stance, readying himself to act at the first sign of danger. The muffled voices continued, overlapping and tense, punctuated by small movements he could just perceive through the sliver of door. His senses were on full alert, every instinct screaming that the palace had shifted from routine to something precariously fragile. The calm of the morning was over. Something unseen, secretive, and possibly explosive was unfolding behind that hidden door. And Rowan Hale, loyal guard and silent observer, was about to face a moment that would test every principle he had ever sworn to uphold. The amber glow from the hidden chamber flickered against the hallway wall as Rowan Hale crouched just out of sight, every muscle taut with anticipation. He could now hear the queen consort's voice more clearly, firm, controlled, yet threaded with an edge he hadn't often heard in person. "It must remain hidden until the king is fully briefed. No one else can know, not the staff, not the aides, not even the family." There was a pause, a deliberate emphasis on secrecy, and then a soft sigh, almost imperceptible, as if she weighed the gravity of the decision she had made. Rowan's pulse quickened. This was no routine correspondence or minor administrative matter. Whatever was inside that chamber was of extraordinary importance and danger. A second voice, younger, hesitant, quivered in response. Rowan recognized Olivia Hawthorne's timbre immediately. "Yes, Your Majesty. But what if someone discovers it before the meeting? What if—" Camilla interrupted, the sharpness cutting the air like a blade. "There can be no mistakes. You will ensure it is protected." "Understood?" Her words carried the unmistakable authority of someone who wielded power silently, yet absolutely. Rowan's jaw tightened. He had stood guard through royal tempests before, but the tone here signaled something beyond routine protocol, something secretive enough to alter the balance of trust in the palace. He shifted slightly, careful to avoid disturbing the curtain that shielded his view. The room beyond was small, lined with high shelves stacked with ornate boxes and leather-bound books. At the center sat a pedestal, draped in deep crimson velvet. From what he could see, it seemed almost ceremonial, as though whatever lay beneath the cloth was of immense symbolic value. Rowan's instincts screamed that this was the hidden heart of the chamber, the object Camilla guarded so fiercely that even Olivia, her trusted aide, was tense in its presence. Then, almost imperceptibly, a sound from the corridor caught his attention, a faint scuff, followed by a hesitant knock. Rowan's eyes narrowed. The protocol of the palace forbade anyone from wandering these corridors unnoticed, and yet someone approached. The footfall was light, but determined, deliberate. The sound set his guard even higher. Whoever it was, they were not ordinary staff. His mind raced through possibilities. An aide returning for forgotten files, a curious member of the extended family, or someone with intent far more sinister. Camilla's voice rose slightly in warning. "Do not let anyone near until I give the order. This room is private, and any breach will have consequences." Her eyes, as far as Rowan could imagine them through the sliver of door, likely glinted with a steely resolve. Rowan's heart thumped in rhythm with her words. The moral stakes had just escalated. No longer was he merely observing. He was now a potential barrier between secrecy and exposure, between safety and scandal. A shadow crossed the doorway to the chamber. Rowan instinctively adjusted his stance, ready to act, though still hidden. To his astonishment, it was Prince William, moving with a measured, almost imperious calm. The Duke of Cambridge's gaze swept the room with practiced authority, lips pressed into a thin line. His presence changed the dynamic entirely. Camilla's expression shifted surprise, tempered by controlled irritation. "William," she said, her tone measured yet icy, "this is not your concern. Leave." William's eyes did not waver. "Mother, I am responsible for ensuring that everything connected to the crown is handled properly. If there is something here that requires my awareness or involvement, I must be present." The air tightened with unspoken tension. Rowan could sense the weight of the moment, the blend of duty, authority, and the quiet struggle for clarity within the family. The Queen Consort's hand trembled slightly as she adjusted the edge of the crimson cloth, carefully keeping the object beneath it concealed. Rowan's mind raced. He had trained for years in protocol, ethics, and discretion, yet he had never faced a situation where a member of the family directly challenged another in a private setting of such high stakes. His duty was clear: protect the palace and its occupants. Yet the moral dilemma pressed down with suffocating weight. Should he step forward and intervene if the confrontation escalated, or maintain his position as silent observer until the storm resolved itself? William's gaze fell on Olivia, who shrank slightly under the scrutiny. "You were instructed to handle this alone?" he asked sharply. Olivia's eyes widened, and she nodded nervously. "Yes, Your Highness, but it is delicate." Rowan's heart ached for her. She was loyal, earnest, and caught in the crossfire of a confrontation far beyond her experience. He clenched his fists, ready to act if anyone attempted to harm her, even as the royal power struggle played out before him. Camilla's voice dropped to a controlled whisper, each word carrying unmistakable weight. "It is delicate precisely because it must remain out of view for now. The king does not yet know the full details of this discovery. When the moment is right, everything will be explained. Until then, we must handle this with absolute care." Rowan felt his pulse quicken at her words. Hidden discoveries, secrecy, discretion, this was far beyond the routine expectations of his role. Whatever rested in that room held significance for the Queen Consort, something important enough that its careful handling was essential. Suddenly, Olivia's hand slipped, brushing against the edge of the pedestal. The crimson cloth shifted slightly, revealing a glimmer of gold beneath. Rowan's breath caught. He could see, even from his concealed vantage, the outline of a crown-shaped artifact, encrusted with jewels that caught the candlelight and reflected it in small, dazzling flashes. His training flared into overdrive. This was no ordinary ceremonial item. It was priceless, politically potent, and far too delicate to risk in a confrontation between two members of the royal family. William's eyes narrowed, fixating on the artifact. "Camilla," he said, his tone sharp yet controlled. "What exactly is this? Why was it hidden? The palace deserves to know." Camilla's lips pressed into a thin line. She did not answer immediately, instead allowing the silence to stretch like a drawn-out warning. Rowan could almost hear the unspoken calculation: admit, deny, or deflect. Each choice carried weighty consequences, morally, politically, and personally. The young guard's chest tightened. Rowan understood the stakes perfectly. If the artifact were mishandled, revealed prematurely, or exploited, the fallout could extend far beyond the palace walls. Not only the reputation of the Queen Consort, but the security of the family, the trust of the staff, and even the perception of the monarchy itself hung in delicate balance. Rowan's instincts screamed that this was a moment demanding vigilance, courage, and perhaps intervention if discretion failed. Camilla finally spoke, her voice low, deliberate. "This chamber has always existed, William. There are elements of the crown's legacy that must remain protected until their time. Some truths are dangerous in the wrong hands." Rowan's breath caught at the gravity of her words. Dangerous truths, hidden artifacts, royal secrets. He had seen conflict in the palace before, but never layered with such moral, historical, and emotional weight. William's response was measured, but his eyes betrayed exasperation and determination. And yet secrecy cannot justify risk to the family or to the public trust. If this is as significant as you suggest, it must be safeguarded properly, not concealed behind shadows and whispers. Rowan felt the tension coil in his shoulders. The clash was not only personal, it was a test of loyalty, discretion, and judgment. The young assistant, Olivia, now visibly trembling, clutched the document against her chest, caught between obedience and fear. The artifact shimmered beneath the crimson cloth, almost taunting in its concealment. Rowan's mind raced. One wrong move, one accidental gesture, could shatter decades of protocol, compromise the family, or even spark scandal. And yet, inaction could also be dangerous. He had to be ready. He had to remain vigilant. His moral resolve, the very reason he had dedicated his life to guarding the crown, demanded that he be prepared to act, protect, and intervene if necessary. The room felt smaller with every heartbeat. The air was thick with unspoken threats, fragile alliances, and the weight of hidden knowledge. Rowan pressed himself against the wall, watching, listening, waiting for the inevitable escalation. Every instinct told him that the moral dilemma had reached its peak. Discretion or intervention, loyalty or courage, obedience or the protection of the innocent. And in that suspended moment, the palace itself seemed to lean forward, holding its breath, as though anticipating the revelation that would inevitably unfold. Rowan Hale's pulse pounded in rhythm with the flickering candlelight, as the tension in the secret chamber reached a boiling point. Camilla's hand hovered over the crimson cloth that concealed the artifact, her fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. For a moment, silence claimed the room, dense and heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Olivia Hawthorne clutched the folded document tighter, her knuckles white, her gaze darting between the Queen Consort and Prince William, unsure where to place her loyalty. Rowan remained hidden, every sense alert, ready to act the instant discretion threatened to fail. The palace, so familiar and routine in daylight hours, had transformed into a precarious stage where a single misstep could ignite scandal. Camilla finally spoke, her voice low, measured, but carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of urgency. "William, you will not touch this. The king will be informed in due time, but until then, it must remain within these walls, unseen by all but those sworn to protect it." Her eyes flicked to Olivia, softening for just a heartbeat, then hardened again. Rowan felt the calculated shift, a masterful blend of authority and subtle manipulation, designed to assert control while maintaining plausible compliance from her aide. William's gaze, sharp and unwavering, fixed on the artifact. "Camilla, discretion has its limits. Secrets like this object, these documents, they are not yours to hide alone. If mishandled, the consequences will extend far beyond us. I cannot allow recklessness. Not in this palace. Not in this family." His tone, though composed, carried the weight of both authority and moral indignation. Rowan felt a shiver run down his spine. The conflict was no longer personal. It was a test of integrity, of judgment, of the very principles that upheld the monarchy. The flicker of light from the candle revealed the edges of the artifact. A crown-shaped relic, encrusted with precious stones, each one catching the amber glow in dazzling flashes. Rowan's breath caught. It was exquisitely crafted, impossibly delicate, and radiating an aura of importance he had not anticipated. The guard had seen priceless objects before, had protected royal jewels, ceremonial swords, and historical documents, but this was different. It was more than treasure. It was history, power, and secrecy wrapped into a single, fragile symbol. Suddenly, Olivia's hand slipped, brushing against the velvet cloth. The crown shifted slightly, revealing more of its intricate design. Rowan's heart leapt into his throat. One false move, one moment of distraction, and centuries of legacy could be endangered. He felt an overwhelming moral imperative to act, to intervene before human error or hubris caused irreparable damage. The tension pressed on him from all sides, the Queen Consort's authority, the prince's moral weight, the assistant's fear, and the palace itself, silent yet anticipating the unfolding drama. Camilla's eyes narrowed. "Do not touch it," she said again, this time with sharp finality. "It is not for you, William. You may have authority, but you lack understanding. Some truths are dangerous, meant only for those with patience to respect them." Rowan recognized the underlying threat. This was not merely a family disagreement. It was a test of loyalty, a deliberate moral gauntlet designed to measure obedience, courage, and discretion. William stepped closer, the distance between him and the pedestal shrinking. Patience is meaningless when secrecy endangers the family, the crown, and the integrity of the palace, he replied. His eyes flicked toward Rowan's hidden vantage point as if sensing an unseen presence. The guard tensed, though he remained concealed. He felt the weight of William's scrutiny, as if the prince knew that a loyal observer might yet intervene. Rowan's hand rested on the baton at his side, fingers tightening around the smooth wood. He had to be ready, but he also had to remain patient. Timing was everything. Olivia trembled, her voice barely audible. "Your Highness, perhaps we should wait. Perhaps the king's approval." Camilla's glance silenced her instantly, a flicker of warning that was almost invisible, yet unmistakable. Rowan felt his chest tighten. The young aide was caught between obedience and fear, her loyalty tested in real time. One wrong choice could shatter her confidence or worse, place her in peril. Rowan's mind raced. He had sworn to protect the palace and its people, and now that oath extended beyond protocol into moral territory. He had to ensure no one was harmed by secrecy, fear, or impulsive decisions. Camilla's voice softened just enough to reveal her strategy. "The king must learn first. The moment is not now. The consequences are too great." She adjusted the cloth over the artifact with a delicate, precise motion, and Rowan felt a surge of tension. It was the kind of movement that signaled both concealment and defiance, a statement that she alone controlled this secret, at least for the moment. William's jaw tightened, but his expression softened slightly. He did not advance further. "Then we wait," he said, though the words lacked conviction. His eyes remained fixed on the crown. The unspoken understanding between him and Camilla, thick, with unresolved power dynamics. Rowan exhaled slowly, yet his muscles stayed coiled, every sense tuned for any sudden motion, any threat to the fragile equilibrium. Minutes passed, each one drawn out, heavy with suspense. The palace seemed to hold its breath with him, the corridors outside silent except for distant echoes. Rowan's gaze darted between Olivia, trembling yet obedient, and the queen consort, calculating and resolute. Every fiber of his being told him that this moment was pivotal. It was not just about a crown or a document, but about the balance of authority, morality, and loyalty within the royal family itself. Finally, Camilla stepped back, her hands clasped, signaling the end of this immediate confrontation. "You will leave this room now, William. Wait for the king's briefing, as instructed. No one else may enter until then." Her tone carried finality, yet beneath it was a tremor of tension that betrayed the enormity of what she had just controlled. William hesitated, then nodded, his eyes lingering on the artifact. He turned, his steps echoing as he left the chamber, leaving the queen consort and Olivia alone. Rowan waited a heartbeat longer, ensuring no immediate danger before he stepped forward. Careful, deliberate. The corridors had returned to their quiet rhythm, but the moral weight of what he had witnessed pressed heavily against him. Camilla's secret was no longer purely theoretical. He had glimpsed the crown, shaped artifact, understood the stakes, and felt the moral tension of protecting the innocent, the vulnerable, and the palace itself. As he approached the chamber, Olivia looked up, her eyes wide with fear and relief. Rowan offered a small, reassuring nod, careful not to overstep, yet signaling that she was not alone. Her document rested against her chest, fragile yet critical, and Rowan recognized the unspoken truth. She had been entrusted with a burden too heavy for her experience. He felt a surge of protective resolve. He glanced at the pedestal once more. The crown-shaped artifact gleamed beneath the crimson cloth, a silent testament to history, secrecy, and the power of discretion. Rowan's thoughts raced. The king would need to be informed, the artifact safeguarded, and the moral balance preserved. But one thing was certain, this was only the beginning. The palace had revealed its hidden heartbeat, and the consequences of this secret would ripple outward in ways no one yet imagined. Rowan straightened, every sense alive, and in that moment, he understood the magnitude of what had just occurred. The secret chamber had been exposed, not fully, but enough to ignite moral dilemmas, test loyalties, and reveal the intricate interplay of authority within the royal family. The queen consort had maintained control for now, but the hidden crown had already shifted the balance of power, and the consequences would not remain hidden for long. As he moved to report the incident to the king's aides, Rowan cast one last glance at the chamber door. The flicker of amber light now dimmed, concealing both artifact and tension alike. The palace corridors seemed to pulse around him, alive with whispers of secrets, loyalty, and unspoken conflict. Rowan knew the next steps would require careful judgment, courage, and the unwavering commitment that had defined his life in service to the crown. Outside the chamber, the corridors were calm once more. Yet Rowan's mind replayed every detail: the muffled voices, Olivia's trembling hands, Camilla's controlled authority, William's piercing gaze, and the artifact itself. Each element was a piece of a puzzle that was far from complete. One thing was certain: the palace had changed, the secret chamber had been exposed, and the guard who had witnessed it all was now an unspoken participant in a story that would ripple through the royal household for weeks, perhaps months, to come. And somewhere, just beyond the next corridor, a shadow moved, silent, observing, waiting. Rowan's instincts flared. The morning calm had passed. The palace, once serene, had become a stage for intrigue, suspense, and hidden truths. Whatever came next, he knew that history was watching and that the smallest decisions could tip the balance of loyalty, morality, and power. The door to the secret chamber remained closed, the crimson cloth concealing the crown-shaped artifact, but Rowan's mind could not rest. He knew that the revelation, though partial, had already set events in motion. And as he turned to leave, the faintest whisper of movement reached his ears, a signal that the story was far from over, that the palace's secrets were not yet fully revealed, and that the next step in the drama was only moments away. The shadow lingered, the palace waited, and the guard, silent, vigilant, and morally resolute, prepared for what was to come.